Welcome to Siding with Love, a podcast of the Gloucester Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Carol Bousquet, and I'm one of the co-hosts, along with Reverend Janet Parsons. We're very pleased to be back in the 1623 studios to present the fifth episode of our podcast, Siding with Love. Welcome. Our goal is to create a space for thoughtful conversation and connection. You'll find us on our Gloucester Unitarian Universalist Church YouTube page. We hope you'll share the link with others, and we especially hope you'll leave a comment there. We'd love to hear from you. Hello, Reverend Janet.
Hello, Carol. It's great to be back, and I wanted to second your request that folks talk to us. Our listenership is increasing, and it would be great to get some feedback. We welcome that.
That's right. Along the lines of creating conversation and connection, that's one of the myriad places that we have that opportunity. So our theme this month is curiosity. Your sermon Sunday was titled The Blessing and the Curse. You said there are different ways of looking at curiosity and asked if it is a helpful spiritual practice or an attribute that creates problems. I'm curious, what was your sense of how your sermon was received?
I think it was well received. I think that everybody's favorite part, though, was the story that led us into it. The inquiry, I guess you could say, for Sunday was, so is curiosity a good thing or a bad thing? And so we opened with the story of Pandora's box and how Pandora was created as the first woman who was given this box and told not to peek into it. And of course, she got curious and did, and that's when it released all the evils into the world. And I then started talking about Eve in the Garden of Eden, which was strong parallels with that as well. Very curious, very egged on by some voice telling her, try this, and another voice saying, don't you dare. So it was fun to see the parallels of those two questions. But the interesting thing that comes out of both of those stories is that the gods punish people for being too curious. So is curiosity a good thing or a bad thing? And when you think about human nature, humans are naturally curious, and it's one of the things that makes us the most human. You think about our ability to love, our ability to feel compassion, but also our ability to be curious, because otherwise, how do we progress? If we weren't looking at birds and thinking, wow, I wonder how they fly, how would we ever start to figure that out? If we never looked around and wondered, if we never looked up into the night sky and said, what are those? And why does the moon look this way on some days and that way on other days? And so it all leads from a place of curiosity. So curiosity should be seen as a good thing, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then on the other hand, you have the divinities, the divine beings saying, oh no, and you're going to be cast out of paradise for all eternity for having been curious. And so clearly they didn't think it was a good thing. And as I said on Sunday, what is it that the gods didn't want us to know? So it's a fascinating thing to think about, that there is this paradox of curiosity, because yes, it is essentially something fundamentally human that we shouldn't try to avoid. We should respond to our natural sense of curiosity. But on the other hand, yes, it can lead us into trouble. And when you think about aging, for example, how much do you want to know about your future life? And how do you think you'll react if you start finding out, if you're curious about your future and then we're able to find out things you didn't really want to know? So again, it's very mixed. It's truly a paradox. And I'm always looking for paradoxes to talk about in church, because I think it's fascinating and it's a way for us to engage in conversations about things. And we can really grow by considering the paradox and trying to hold the both and. So I came down on the side of saying that it is a blessing and a curse. It's neither nor, it's both. And we just have to use it for good when we can and be careful with it when we need to be careful with it.
You hit on a particularly important point in your sermon Sunday that's always been near and dear to my heart, is how the divinities, mythology, the Bible have chosen the female gender to punish for their curiosity, which has led to a history of oppression and punishment and second-rate status for women. I recommend anyone who may be curious at this point to be sure to listen to your sermon, which is also posted on the YouTube page. It was stellar, and it really spoke to me as a feminist and a person who's always looked at the world through a feminist lens.
I know, it's why the blame? Why blame Eve for being curious? Why blame Pandora? And that has carried down all throughout history. And I think that even up to the present day, women are criticized for being too curious. I'm going back a few years now to think about how back in the Senate, the U.S. Senate, Mitch McConnell was attempting to silence Elizabeth Warren. You might remember that. And
Do I?
Yeah, exactly.
The famous phrase.
Yes.
Nevertheless, she persisted.
Nevertheless, she persisted, making her sound like a bad person for doing that she was wrong and bad for being persistent. And wouldn't you want your United States Senator to be persistent? And again, this is relevant because it comes right into the present day. Don't ask too many questions, honey. Step away from the microphone.
Don't worry your pretty little head. We've heard them all. I'm glad within the Unitarian Universalist faith that we think twice and three times about these kinds of equivalents, and that we are surrounded by thoughtful people who are very clear that, no, we all have our gifts.
And I would just add that when you think about the gods of Olympus, for example, they come across as being just a tad, shall we say, insecure. They are trying hard to limit what people can know. This is knowing about fire, knowing about all the evils in the world. These belong to the gods. You humans don't get to play with these things. They're hoarding this power and this knowledge for themselves. I read that as a little insecure. So we're worshiping these entities that are insecure? Why is that?
And it mimics our present day autocratic leadership in such an accurate way. It's amazing how similar.
That's why the biblical stories and the mythology stories never go away, because fundamentally people are people, no matter what era. You just scratch the surface and you come up with the same themes and the same situations over and over again. So the old stories always inform us. They're a delight to go back to for that reason.
Absolutely. So let's move on to our next segment. What are you reading? In my case, I just finished reading the novel Wreck by Catherine Newman. The Ipswich Library has the Louise and Hugh Johnson lecture series and features an author in person 2 times a year. So she's coming up next week, and of course I wanted to read at least one publication. These are fantastic book groups with about 200 strong in attendance, and seeing an author in person, there's nothing to compare it to. You can only imagine what an author might be like when you're reading the book. But was it ever a difficult read to follow after River of the Gods by Candace Millard, which is our church book group selection, which we will also discuss next week? That book was just amazing. It was amazing. And I'm so pleased. I had a hard time getting started, but once I did, I just was completely taken by the book. That author, Candace Millard, was a former writer and editor for National Geographic magazine, and the book itself, a quote from the jacket, is another peerless story of courage and adventure set against the backdrop of the race to explain Africa by the colonial powers. She is a gifted author, and I learned so much from it. It shows what curiosity can amount to in one's life.
I was going to say, I think that it was completely coincidental that we chose this book here during a month when we're talking about curiosity, but it was perfect because, again, it just exemplifies that drive to find things out We're going to find the source of the Nile. Another one of hers that was a great read was called The River of Doubt. And this was Teddy Roosevelt's exploration in the Amazon to find a certain tributary of the Amazon that people had heard about, but no one had ever found. And he tried to find it. It was so intensely difficult. And there were so many things like insects and parasites and everything else that he got very sick and almost died. So again, there's that curiosity thing again. Good thing, bad thing. Who can say?
Yeah. She really does her research and must have a fantastic team to call on to write her books.
Yeah, but always worth reading.
What are you reading, Janet?
In addition to that, I've just started that actually. And then I've heard about a new book. It's new to me. It's called The Daughter of Time. It's actually from 1951. And it is a detective novel investigating the death of King Richard III and the princes in the Tower of London. And as people might recall, they unearthed Richard III's remains in a parking lot a few years ago and did DNA testing and studied the skeleton and determined that was in fact Richard III. And so that brought forth this book again, that the book 70 years ago was suggesting another story that went against the prevailing story, and the discovery of his body actually corroborated her fictional account. So I decided I really wanted to read that. It sounded like a great book.
Sounds like a good read. So for cultural events, as usual, we have our Friday Bring Your Own Lunch gathering. Fridays at noon at our church. Everyone is invited. Bring a friend. It's a nice, relaxed hour to connect and get to know other folks in the church community. June will wrap that series, and we'll have the summer break from our Bring Your Own Lunches. Do join us. And then our book club is May 12th at 3 o'clock, River of Gods by Candace Millard, as we just discussed.
Then coming up on Sunday, May 17th, we're having our annual New Member Sunday. And this is when we celebrate people who've decided to join the church community over the course of the last year. And we call them forward and we make some promises to them about what the community will do to support them. And it's a meaningful day. It's really a lovely day. It's a great opportunity for the congregation as a whole to sit down and say, what's this church for, essentially? It's a good time to take stock. And as part of that, so then we're going to have a nice lunch afterwards. And then we're also holding a congregational conversation as well about the mission and vision of the church, the future of the church. And this is going to be the kickoff event for a lot of conversations coming up in the next year or so about our direction and our vision and our mission, which is very important work for a church to do. So we're looking forward to that very much on May 17th.
Wonderful. Our services are broadcast live for anyone wishing to attend from away at 10 a.m. The link is on our website and in our weekly newsletter, which arrives on Fridays. Do sign up to receive our weekly news on our website. It is also posted on our Facebook page. That does it this month. Thank you, listeners, for joining us.
I wanted to close with a wonderful quote that I found by Albert Einstein about curiosity. He said, "The important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. One cannot help but be in awe when he contemplates the mysteries of eternity, of life, of the marvelous structure of reality. It is enough if one tries merely to comprehend a little of this mystery every day. Never lose a holy curiosity." Thank you, Albert Einstein.
Thank you for joining Reverend Janet Parsons and me, Carol Bousquet, today. We're the co-hosts of the Gloucester Unitarian Universalists podcast, Siding with Love. For more information, please visit our website, gloucesteruu.org. And speaking of love, we'd love to see you in church soon. Until next time, be well.